Hey guys, welcome back to Sunday Sermon with Ola. Okay, um, I'm glad to be back. This has been a good week. I am grateful. Had another patron join my Patreon, patreon.com/Ola the Comedian. Thank you guys for loving the work we do. Um, I've also had plenty of feedback and interaction over today's topic. As you know, if you follow me, I was test driving this in my Instagram stories, and it's clearly brought up a lot of good conversation and pause for thought. So before we get into today's topic, I just want to let you know that this is just the part where I say what's on my mind, but I want to hear from you as well at 8 p.m. on my Instagram live. That's where we do the discussion. Last week's was intense. Oh my goodness, we got into it. Yo, thank you to everybody who gets involved in the Instagram lives. You really add value to the work that's going on here, so God bless you. And I think we should just get into today's topic because I think it's going to be a meaty one. I'm going to try and keep myself to the same sort of time parameters. But I recognize that this is something that requires a length and breadth in discussion. So to set up the discussion, it's based on this video clip that's been going around. So in this video clip, this woman is on a podcast. There's two women on a podcast actually. There's one that's telling her story, and this guy's interviewing her. And in the midst of telling her story, she reveals that it was her birthday. She was out. She saw this NBA team out. She's kind of already dealt with them before. There was someone who works with the team. They went to a hotel room to have sex. Then like 7 members of the NBA team came in, and she filleted all of them, and it was lit, and she had a fun time, and she doesn't regret it, and blah blah blah. So the reason why this is even a discussion topic is because every time I saw this video posted, in the comments there'd be a whole bunch of people saying this is disgusting, and more surprisingly to me would be women saying that it's disgusting. Now, on the last Instagram live, if you were there, you know I've had the charges leveled at me of being sexist. So I try to understand. I don't always agree, but I try to understand. And I'm not just trying to like disagree for the sake of being controversial, but I don't want to ever say I agree with something that I don't fully agree with just because it's easier to say that. I won't always question it out loud, but within safe spaces, I hate that term, within like, amongst friends, put it that way, amongst friends, I'll say what's on my mind, and because I want to, one, be held accountable if I have the wrong point of view, but two, also learn from other perspectives. So I try and listen to what women are saying about their own experience. I believe some things are human experiences, and that's the reason why I speak on them, even if it's a woman, because I don't believe everything is different about being a woman. I think some things are different, some things are just human. I don't think, I think difference between men and women is that they might say, calorie recommendation is this much, but humans need to eat food. So we can talk about the fact that we need to eat food. I might not necessarily talk about what it is to diet. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of difference. So, with all of that preamble and and caveats and disclaimers, the general trend I've kind of got is that from women who are having sex is that they don't want to be judged for it. They don't want to be judged harshly. They don't want to be told that they don't want to be spoken of negatively for enjoying their sexuality, and that it's a tool of misogyny and patriarchal values and so on and so forth. Basically, if a woman has sexual activity that she has chosen to do, literally the only caveats are she's not hurting anybody, she's an adult, she's made her choice, she's given her consent. After that, we can't really say much. But the truth is, the reason why this was so fascinating is because this was an example in which she's a woman, she's given her consent, she says she enjoyed it, And yet there are plenty of women, and it doesn't seem to hurt anybody, at least obviously in the way that, the secular, society would say is hurting somebody, not like cheating or something. So in this situation, I don't see where the women are coming from that are calling her disgusting, calling her a hoe. And upon further investigation, I'm seeing a lot of women say, clearly she needs help, it's mental issues, daddy issues, one kind of issues or the other. But it seems to be quite arbitrary. Like, how did you now decide that this is somebody who needs help? So that's where the question really comes from. Is like, if you are somebody who advocates for women to be promiscuous, where is this line where all of a sudden it becomes problematic? She hasn't said anything about feeling forced or whatever. People are projecting stuff onto her that there's no way. Okay, maybe you wouldn't want to do it, but maybe she did want to do it. So at this point, I'm going to give you my point of view because I do a lot of double speak, really, because I try to understand those who don't come from my viewpoint. I make it very clear on this podcast, I'm a Christian. So in my point of view, in terms of like sexually um something that's problem in terms of it being problematic sexually, I would say so, yes. I would say there's a problem here, but I don't start there because it's seven guys or because it's NBA players or because they walked into a hotel room. I say it's problematic right from when we step out of God's design for sex, which is between a man and a woman inside marriage, and they, have joined together before God and God has sanctioned it and so on. So I make it clear that my own behavior when I'm watching pornography is also outside of God's plan, and therefore there's a problem with it. I make it clear that if you were having sex before marriage, like I also did, there's a problem here. So my line, I guess, where I'm that in terms of what's being crossed, starts way earlier than I guess most people. And the reason why I have that is because as human beings change, the standard of God's standard doesn't change. So that's always my anchoring point to come back to. So for those who are more permissive in their attitudes, for those who believe that sleeping around isn't a problem, as long as it's healthy, consensual, and adult, healthy is in inverted commas, by the way, I want to know where you draw the line. Is it that the line is conveniently always on the right side of you? What I mean by that is, do you forever have the line in a place that consistently justifies your behavior such that you can then still look down on someone else? Because what I want to know is, if it was four guys, would it be a problem? If it was three guys, would it be a problem? If it was two, if it was one. If a guy just walked into the room and she decided to give him head, would that be a problem? So, okay, if that one's fine. If it's two, is that a problem? If it's three, is that a problem? Because based on the parameters that you've set, there really shouldn't be a problem whether it's 1 or 7. Do you see? And I think that sometimes, if you know that there's something in you that inherently wants to question this behavior, it's easier to just call her disgusting, because if you investigate it too deep, you might have to look at yourself. If you started asking real questions about why is it I have a problem with what she did, then you might have to ask more questions about the way that you maybe carry out your sexuality. Everyone makes it obvious. They say, oh, fine, yeah, obvious, this is normal for you to do this. But if you go back a few years, it wasn't normal then. There are a lot of girls today who might be like, yeah, okay, I met a guy, we had a one night stand, what's the big deal? But this girl's disgusting. But if you go back a few years, the prevailing attitude might be that you were disgusting for sleeping with a guy that you just met. Right? Now, first of all, one thing I definitely need to add is that even though I believe that something may not be the right way to go or that it's sinful, I don't believe that's necessarily a reason to call people disgusting, or I think maybe the acts you might want to describe as disgusting. But in terms of people, I hesitate from putting that label on the person. And I don't think specifically that, even calling them names to their faces even really helps at all. Giving somebody a label does help to define something, but it doesn't really help them to move away from it if that's the ultimate aim. So we really have to talk about the role that sex plays in our understanding of relationships, power, morals, and one thing that I put across on the Instagram story is that I think I have this underlying belief that the reason why women are saying she's disgusting and not backing her in some sense of the word, in terms of what I was seeing, is that, and bear in mind, I did a separate poll on my page, and still, like, it was like, is this her being empowered to make her own choices, or is this hoe behavior? And vastly, the majority said hoe behavior, and there were mostly women in the hoe behavior category. So the reason why I believe it is that way is because I believe it has a lot to do with the men in the picture. And I acknowledged on my story that this is going to be quite masculine centric, because obviously I'm a man and I'm commenting it. But I think that it has a lot to do with it. I think that um, when men are too happy, I think it bothers women. They go, because if the narrative about men is that we are oppressing women and that our entire aim is to hold women down, then if you see something that upsets men, you go, yes, we're winning, we're rebelling, and we are winning. We're doing well. We're going against those men. They're not happy. The men are sad. Oh, you're sad. Your butt hurt. Dry your tears, mate. Oh, I love to sip on your tears. Whatever it is. That makes us feel good to know that the person that we think is against us is upset. If the men are too if the men are happy with it, then we go, oh, well then now you're like playing into that power dynamic. So if a woman walks into a room, or seven men walk into a room where a woman is, and she wants to fillet all of them, the fact that all seven men walk out feeling pretty good about themselves and about the fact that they had a lit night, I think bothers some women. I think it bothers some women as well, because then they kind of feel like girls who do stuff like that mess up the market for them. Because if they're not willing to, be so sexually free, then, or if that's what men are coming to expect from women, then it prices them out the market. I think there's an element of that as well. But I do think that there's an element to which it's like, you're playing into their power dynamic. Why are you doing this? Even if she wanted to, even if that was the original parameter, now it becomes about playing into their dynamic. And I gave this example of, like, when teenagers feel like their parents are their enemies, they love doing things that make their parents upset. And if their parents are too happy with what they're doing, it no longer becomes acceptable. You see that in that storyline in so many different TV shows and tropes, where, like, the teenage girl will start dating a guy specifically because she knows her dad's going to hate this guy. Be one bad boy, the thug, and he's dogging her in her room upstairs. And if it's Oyinbo family, the dad's upstairs looking up, hearing the bed squeaking, going, oh my goodness, I just wish Sharon would stop. It's never a Nigerian household that they do this. But I've also seen the converse, where they pick a guy, the dad likes the guy, and then all of a sudden the guy is no longer appealing. And this is why sometimes I feel like we have to be careful, because in a sense, we're trying to undo wrongs of the past, but we're trying to undo them by simply playing some weird game of vengeance with, the offending party. It works. It applies to black people as well. If we lived our entire lives trying to do what upsets white people, that's not progress. Essentially, why would you turn down the right thing for you just because it also makes a previous offender happy? So I think it's a weird way to go about things. And I think that if let's say this woman's post came with a bunch of guys saying, "Ah, this woman's disgusting, what a slag," I think women would have jumped up in her defense. Like, she's liberated, she's living her body. Why do men always feel need to comment on stop policing women's bodies, blah blah blah. But so far as men are like, go, whatever, I ain't gonna marry her, and she knows the deal. She ain't trying to marry nobody. She's out here sleeping with NBA players. Then all of a sudden women are bothered. Now women are like, that's disgusting, that's hoe behaviour. I don't think you really believe in not policing women's bodies. I think you want to be able to comment as well. I think you want to be able to say when something is wrong, it's wrong. You just don't want to hear it from men. And that's fine. Just admit that, though. That's something that came out in a previous Instagram live. It's like, I can't remember who, I think it was Emily. Emily, shout out to you, Emily. I think she said, like, I just have a problem with hearing what men want from women. And I was like, hell yeah, of course. Of course. If a man says, oh, this is what I want from my woman, it automatically sounds oppressive. And that's what we were discussing, the whole marital name discussion. But anyway, back on track. If we're going to talk about, honestly, where do we go from here? I think we need to talk about the fact that what we've been sold on sex is not real and it's not true. I think, in my true honest opinion, in terms of how permissive we are as a society, I love it because I love the fact that it means that there's room for redemption. I think liberal attitudes give room for redemption because if, let's say, you were to be stoned because you fornicated, most of us wouldn't be here. We'd be dead by now. So I think it allows you to come to a more realistic and self-determined decision about your own sexuality. That's what liberal atmospheres are good for. But I think that the downside is that they also encourage terrible behaviors and ways of justifying them as freedom. When women talk about being empowered because now they can do the same things as men, I'm like, do you want what's right for you or do you want what men have? Because not everything that men have is actually good. I know that the paradigm is often painted such as, well, men get to do it, so therefore this is the aim. But that's not. Men have some terrible practices. And yes, of course, women haven't been allowed to do them, but it's actually worked out to your favor. So why would you want to join men in self-destructive behavior? A lot of men are still dealing with how their sexuality has messed them up. Why would you want to join that? I know we make everything look fun, but it's not always fun. And I also think that a lot of what is shown as male sexuality is actually a very small subsection of males, a vocal minority. The vast majority of men are just trying to figure it out. You're just trying to find a girl you like. You're trying to have fun, making mistakes along the way. You have your anxieties. Like, men are human beings as well. Not every man is just out here banging all these girls and then looking down on women. Like, that's not exactly how it works. But anyway, we have to accept the fact that I feel like when it comes to this sex thing, there's more to it. Because if a liberal is telling you, oh, yeah, you're a woman, do what you like with your body, she's not telling you some of the consequences. And I think, when we had that discussion last week about women and accountability, I think a big part of what's tied to that conversation is the fact that sometimes in an attempt to try and break away from oppression, you feel like you should be exempt from consequence. And that's just nature. That's just life. Like, men didn't set nature. There are man-made rules for sure, but there's some things that just are nature. Like men didn't decide that women carry babies. You realize that, right? So you just have to understand that if you both have unprotected sex, the the amount of exposure and weight to consequences is going to be higher on you as a woman because you can get pregnant. Men can get a woman pregnant and not know. He can sleep with a woman in one country, fly to another country, carry out the rest of his life, and never know he's a father. That woman does not have that because of nature, not because of patriarchy, because of nature. If she sleeps with a guy, flies to another country, finds out she's pregnant, it's her body. She has to figure that out now. So there is real consequence here. And it's always not just as simple as like pregnancy and STDs, because those are the obvious ones to go to, but the spiritual impacts. And if you don't believe that there is anything spiritual, that's fine. That's just the way you look at life. But I can assure you that there are elements to this world that we do not see. And we somehow think that sex is different from that. We just think that sex is just somehow this physical act until we're hurt or we're in pain or we feel closely tied to someone. Then we start to acknowledge some of the more intangible aspects about sex. But we want to ignore it when we want to do what we know is somewhat unhealthy. Because your health is much greater than just, going to the doctor and getting a physical. It's got a lot to do with where your mind is at, where your emotions are, where you are at spiritually. Look, I'm not here to judge anybody. A big part of my faith is the fact that it's not over. And the fact that there is hope because Jesus Christ died and, you can be redeemed. And if he can, if he can bring life back to himself, life back to Lazarus, if he can speak life into all these people who had suffered, no situation is beyond redemption. So even if you have slept around and, it's caused problems and so on, the situation can still be redeemed and good can still be brought out of it. That's a huge part of what I'm talking about. And it's a part that doesn't get mentioned as much as, this is a sin, blah, 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 going to hell. So I do want to make sure I mention that part, because if you're listening to me and going, well, Ola's a Christian and it's just telling me everything that's going wrong, I want you to remember this part particular. The entirety of the good news, that's what gospel stands for, the entirety of the good news is that you can have life here today where in an area that was previously dead. So even if you do look back at your life and go, do you know what, if I'm really honest with myself, these choices, yes, they seemed like freedom, but they don't feel like they were good choices. Then there's still hope for you. But one thing that's also interesting is the fact that when I'm speaking to a lot of women on this issue, I'm saying this is what the woman said about her life. And they're saying, nah, it's not like that. She must be going through this. It must be like that. So I'm saying, hold on a second. At what point do you believe women? And at what point do you assess for yourself? Because that's another narrative that I've been told. If a woman tells me her experience, I'm supposed to accept it at face value. That's why I was being accused of being sexist, because I wanted to assess it for myself. And obviously I've never been a woman. I don't have that experience. So I'm assessing it from the outside. And that's fine. But the problem is I'm supposed to take a woman's word over mine, 100%. Okay, I understand that's what you believe. But here, this is a clear example of this woman saying, I enjoyed it. It was lit. And yet still women are saying, nah, man. She's still lying to herself. She's got a lot of pain and trauma that she needs to work through and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, so at what point do you need to listen to women? Because that's her experience. You haven't lived her life. So maybe even that narrative of you just have to take somebody's word for it isn't true, because the women that said this to me, they told me that there were times where they convinced themselves that what they were doing was what they wanted. And it was only afterwards, upon self-reflection, that they realized that this wasn't particularly healthy and I needed to change this about my life. So could it be? Is it possible? Is it possible that maybe sometimes men have good insights on women? Maybe. I don't know. Throwing it out there. Maybe every time you've told a guy to shut up because he doesn't know what it is to be a woman, maybe he was actually giving you gems. Maybe he was giving you bars. Maybe. Because we expect men to listen to women all the time, and women have never been men. But we're supposed to accept that, your wife might have a wise word for you. Your mom might have a wise word for you. Listen. So, is it so crazy to think that maybe you could find a trustworthy man in your life who could speak to you and say, I know I've never been a woman, but this seems like unhealthy behavior? I know you want to sleep around like your male counterparts, but I don't think it's good for you, sis. In love. Like I said before, I don't believe in just like calling up, walking up to go and say, "Oh, you're a slag." I'm saying in love, being able to have that conversation with a woman, being able to help her understand that, look, I know these feminists are pushing this way, but even feminists aren't agreed on certain issues. What does freedom really look like? Sometimes freedom is just being enslaved to a different master. I had a good short conversation with Tina. Shout out to Tina as always, comment section champion. I hope you're going to be back on this live at 8 p.m. Sis. But I had a good, quick conversation with her in the DMs. I said, so is slut shaming misogynistic? She said, yes, because women can't do what men do. And I said, that's not true. Women can do what men do. They just have different outcomes. They can do it, though. They just get, called disgusting, like this woman here. She was like, yeah, true. So I said, okay then. So what needs to happen? Who needs to change? Do men need to start shaming other men for sleeping around, or do women need to stop judging other women? And she said, that's a good question. Now I can tell you as a man of faith, I don't think particularly shaming people is helpful, but I also don't think shame is a bad thing. I think shame is tied to an understanding that you need to be able to reflect on yourself and go, do you know what, this was good behavior and this was bad behavior. And I think it was Bill Burr that said, can you imagine a race of people walking around with no shame? That's a scary thought. People with no shame? Nah. I just don't think we should be the ones to put shame on each other. I think people should be able to have a sense of shame of things that they've done, but they should also have a way out. And they should have redemption. They should have a path towards redemption. And that's what we can offer people. So whether it's a man or a woman, I think if it's unhealthy sexual behavior, which to me is defined as anything outside of marriage anyway, I don't believe I'm going to be the one to shame you. I think upon self-reflection, you might want to look back. And I just want to be there to welcome you with open arms and say, bro, you're still loved. Like, even if you've made some mistakes, sis, it's going to be well with you. God is good. And on that note, stay blessed, guys.